Imagine a company that controls the literal heartbeat of an entire nation's industry. A titan so powerful that its direct competitors are forced to buy parts from it just to stay in business. Now, imagine that same titan just watched its profits vanish by 89% in a single year. We're not talking about a struggling tech startup or a retail chain going through bankruptcy. We are talking about the Swatch Group, the undisputed king of Swiss watchmaking. In early 2026, the numbers leaked, and they were nothing short of a catastrophe. Net profits didn't just dip, they fell off a cliff, plummeting from 219 million to a measly 25 million Swiss francs. For a corporation moving billions in revenue, that isn't a rounding error. It's a total system failure. But the strangest part is that it wasn't caused by bad products or a smarter rival. The very machine built to save Swiss watchmaking is now the one strangling it. To understand how the world's most successful watch empire started eating itself, we have to look at the invisible threads that tie every Swiss watch on your wrist together. The story doesn't start in a modern boardroom, it starts with an apocalypse. Go back to the late 70s, where the Swiss watch industry was essentially a corpse waiting for a burial. Japan had released the quartz movement, a battery-powered oscillator that was cheaper, more accurate, and more durable than anything a master craftsman could build by hand. While the Swiss were bragging about tradition, consumers were buying $9 watches at drugstores that kept better time than a Patek Philippe. 60,000 jobs vanished overnight. Iconic brands that had survived 2 world wars were being sold for the price of their scrap metal. The banks called in a consultant named Nicholas Hayek to liquidate the remains, but he saw something no one else did. Hayek realized the Swiss weren't losing because their watches were bad. They were losing because they were disorganized. Every tiny brand was making its own gears, its own springs, and its own cases. It was a mess of artisanal ego. Hayek's solution was brutal: consolidate everything. He merged the giants, centralized the manufacturing, and built one massive industrial backbone. He created a system where one factory made the engines for everyone. It worked. It saved the industry. But in doing so, he created a dependency that would eventually become a trap. Most people think when they buy a high-end Swiss watch, they're paying for a unique piece of engineering. But if you peel back the dial of almost any Swiss watch made in the last 30 years, you'll likely find the same name: ETA. This Swatch Group subsidiary became the world's gas station. Whether you bought a Tissot or a luxury brand twice the price, the engine was often coming from the same factory floor. But there's something even smaller and more secretive than the movement itself. Meet the hairspring. It's a tiny coil, thinner than a human hair, that regulates the watch's timing. It is the most difficult part of a watch to manufacture. The metallurgy is so complex and the tolerance is so tight that almost no one can do it at scale, except for one company, Nivarox. And who owns Nivarox? The Swatch Group. For decades, Swatch held a 90% monopoly on these springs. Even independent prestige brands were quietly buying their heartbeats from their biggest competitor. It was a perfect system of control, until the world stopped buying the middle. The real crisis hitting the Swatch Group in 2026 isn't at the very top, it's in the belly of the beast. While luxury brands like Breguet and Harry Winston are still selling to the ultra-rich, the middle-class brands like Tissot, Mido, and Hamilton are under siege. The enemy isn't Japan this time, it's Cupertino. The Apple Watch alone sells roughly 50 million units a year, more than the entire Swiss industry combined. When the volume in the middle drops, the giant factories, the ones Hayek built for mass production, start losing money at an alarming rate. You can't just turn off a massive industrial complex. It's like a furnace. If you don't keep feeding it coal, the whole thing freezes. In 2025, Swatch made a choice that seems noble, but proved financially devastating. They refused to lay off workers or cut capacity, betting on a recovery that didn't come fast enough. The result was a production segment that finished the year operationally underwater, dragging the entire empire down with it. The pressure has become so intense that the Swatch Group's legendary composure finally cracked in public. In March 2026, the company did something completely unhinged for a multi-billion-dollar corporation. They published an open letter on their corporate website, publicly attacking analysts at Morgan Stanley. They didn't just disagree with the data, they named names, accused the bank of negligence, and claimed their market analysis was defamatory. It was the corporate equivalent of a public meltdown. When a company that large starts fighting with bank analysts on their homepage, you know the internal heat is reaching a boiling point. At the same time, authorities in Italy began investigating the group for allegedly forcing retailers to keep prices high on brands like Tissot, preventing the market from discounting inventory even as the watches sat gathering dust on the shelves. This wasn't just brand protection, it was inventory crisis management. But there's a final secret that most watch buyers don't realize until they take their watch in for a repair. It's what insiders call the service trap. Many modern movements used in the Swatch Group's mid-tier brands are now laser-regulated at the factory. This means a local, independent watchmaker can't just sit down and tune your watch with a screwdriver anymore. There is no regulator arm to move. The precision is locked in by a machine in Switzerland. When your watch eventually needs a service, the efficient solution is often for the factory to just swap the entire movement out for a new one and toss the old one. Your heirloom becomes a modular, disposable machine. It's the ultimate evolution of Hayek's industrial dream, watches built by robots for a world that might be moving past them. What Hayek actually built wasn't just a company, he built a watch state. It has its own currency in the Swiss-made label, its own infrastructure in the ETA factories, and its own class hierarchy from the plastic swatch to the gold breguet. But as we've seen in 2026, even the strongest states can crumble if they refuse to adapt to a changing world. The industrial machine that rescued the craft 40 years ago has now become the very thing holding it back. The question is no longer whether Swatch can control the industry, but whether they can survive the sheer weight of the machine they created. The brilliant solution of the 80s has become the cage of the 2020s. When you look at a Swiss-made label today, you're looking at a legacy under immense strain. The 89% profit collapse wasn't just a bad year, it was a warning. It told the world that the middle of the market, the affordable mechanical watch that millions of people used as their entry into luxury, is being hollowed out. And because Swatch Group owns the factories that supply the entire industry, their struggle is everyone's struggle. If the engine room stops working, the whole ship starts to sink, no matter how gold the railings are on the upper decks. We are witnessing the end of an era where industrial volume could protect traditional craft. The next time you're browsing for a watch, remember that behind the beautiful dial and the sweeping second hand, there is a massive, invisible industrial war happening. Every gear and every hairspring is a piece of a puzzle that one family has fought to keep together for half a century. But as the Apple Watch counts your steps and the Chinese market remains cold, that puzzle is starting to come apart at the seams. The Swatch Group is betting everything that their watch state is too big to fail. But history has a funny way of showing that when the heartbeat of an industry is controlled by a single hand, all it takes is one missed beat for the whole system to stop. The legacy of Nicholas Hayek is at a crossroads. He saved the Swiss watch from the quartz crisis by making it an industrial product. Now, the industry has to figure out how to save itself from the very industrialization that once gave it life. Whether the Swatch Group can pivot, or if they will continue to fight public battles with banks while their profits evaporate, remains the biggest drama in the world of horology. For now, the machines in Grenchen and Le Locle keep humming, churning out thousands of movements and millions of hairsprings, waiting for a world that might finally be ready to look at something other than a screen. But with a profit margin of 0.4%, they don't have much time left to wait. The clock is ticking, and for the first time in 40 years, the Swiss might not be the ones who know exactly what time it is.